My name is Stacy Parker, and I am a Gateways horticulturist with the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. And I want to thank the staff and faculty, health and well-being folks for partnering with us on programming for all of UC Davis, staff and faculty, retirees, students. This is being sponsored by them. And ordinarily, we have these programs take place out in the Arboretum. But one of the neat things, I guess, about COVID, for lack of a better word, is that this actually has allowed for us to be doing it in Zoom has allowed for us to reach more people, and you don't have to travel so far. So that's kind of exciting. Ordinarily, we meet out in the landscape and we do some watercoloring together, and we supply the supplies and we do it that way. But this year we're trying this different thing. So I'll be interested to hear how this goes. We have a 35-minute video for you all with professional instruction that is given to some of our students in our Nature RX seminar for one of their sessions. Our guest instructor has generously allowed for us to share this with you. His name is Chip Sullivan, and he's a landscape architecture professor at UC Berkeley, and he's also written a book on watercoloring the landscape. And what he's going to share with you today is basically like all the different tools and techniques that he uses to have a practice of watercoloring and sketching the landscape. So I'm going to play that video, but before we get started, does anybody have any questions for me? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So, so there's not much time at the end for us to do, like normally I would say we would do some hands-on and then share at the end. So we can check in after the video and see what you all suggest. Okay, I've got a question in chat. Will you be sending out this recording later? I need to work, we are recording it. I'm sure we will have it available somewhere. I just am not quite sure. So we will make sure that people are aware of where it will be, like if it's going to be on the staff and faculty health and well-being website, or whether or not we'll house it on the Arboretum and Public Garden website. We'll make sure that there's a way to find that, and you're welcome. So I'm going to get started unless anybody has anything else first by playing this video. Okay, just where did it go?
Hello, everybody. I'm Chip Sullivan, and welcome to my segment of Haven and Stacy's Nature RX series, a wonderful seminar. I think it's really been fun. I've done it for a number of years. And so today, my objective is to kind of introduce you to the watercolor sketchbook, field sketching techniques, and then I'm going to take you through a whole step-by-step demonstration of the landscape that we're going to be painting today. So it's really exciting. And why don't we take a few moments while I get set up to begin my demonstration. See you in just a flip side moment.
Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to go over some sketchbooks that you're going to need for field sketching. The very, very first thing you'll need is like some type of small sketchbook that you can carry in your back pocket and get out quite easily. These are some of my very, very first sketchbooks, and I just want to show you like how I sort of evolved. But the whole idea behind field sketching is be able to develop a technique that takes you between 10 to 20 minutes, something that you can really record your landscape that you're observing very, very carefully. These were done at the Villa Vizcaya in Miami, Florida, and they really kind of like set up the basis for my research that I was doing later in passive landscape architectural design. And these, now that field sketching has become so popular and Moleskine has become such a worldwide phenomena, they make their own sketchbooks, but there's a ton of different kinds of watercolor sketchbooks that you can get. The Moleskine aren't they're pretty good. The only thing I would do is these have perforated pages. I wouldn't get anything with perforated pages because when you use it a lot, the pages will kind of eventually kind of work their way loose and come out. But these are my sketchbooks from my Italian trips. So you can see these are all done really, really quickly. I use a 2B pencil. I use one of these clicker pencils, one of these Pintels that's 2B. This way I don't have to stop and sharpen my pencil. I can just continually draw. And the kind of 2B pencil kind of flows right across the page. You can see, like, these are really great examples of how to record your environment. But the other thing I think is important is you don't have to be in Italy and have the most perfect landscape to paint. These are done from my window at my house in Berkeley, and I'm just painting the changing seasons. These are, so you can paint the same view out of your window over and over again. And even things like derelict industrial landscapes. This is down, we live near the railroad tracks, so I go down to the railroad tracks and I'm painting the rapidly kind of disappearing industrial landscape that happens. And then this is just a still life in my mother's home in St. Petersburg of a cactus that she put in her kitchen window. Now, for a number of years, I taught with Joe McBride a California landscape class. And this was a long weekend field trip. What was nice about this class is that we were looking at California landscapes. It was about the ecology of California and the different ecotones throughout California. So one of the things we'd made sure we had our students do is paint the small little details. So not only are you drawing landscapes, and vernacular landscapes, but you're drawing the kind of elements that go into those landscapes. This is the water tower, the furthest point west in California. And this is the famous barn at Sea Ranch that influenced the architecture of Sea Ranch. So it's really important to have some type of sketchbook that's small enough that you can take with you and keep in your hands and be able to pull out and use really, really quickly. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the paper types. As you know, so we talked about sketchbooks, and then you want to talk about what kind of paper do you want to use in your sketchbook. And watercolor paper comes in a whole variety of types. This is a 90-pound hot press, which you can see it's very, very thin. What I don't like about it is it'll buckle because it's so thin. But the hot press paper is basically what I use because it's very, very smooth and I can draw on it in a pencil. But hot press is like a sponge. It absorbs the watercolor very, very quickly and rapidly, and it dries very, very quickly. And that's one of the advantages. But one of the disadvantages is that it dries so quickly. This is your sort of standard Arches 140-pound cold press paper. You can see it's much thicker. And you can also see there's sort of the dappled kind of quality to it. And watercolor paper also comes in different colors. This is ivory, and this is sort of an off-white. But what's nice about this paper is the watercolor floats across the surface. It doesn't absorb into the surface very, very quickly, and allows you a little more time to work the paper. But if you're in the field and wanting to work rapidly, you want a type of paper that dries very, very quickly. And this is really tough. This is 300-pound paper. You can see how thick it is. It doesn't buckle at all. You can build a house with this. It's so heavy. But those are the basic papers. As you go from 90-pound, which is the lightest, to 140-pound, which is a little heavier, to the 300-pound rough. And that gives you a good idea of the kind of papers, because there's so many papers out there, it can be kind of baffling at first. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is your kind of brush types. What kind of brush do you use? And there's a whole variety of brushes out there, but typically what you want, and this is a sable hair brush, Winsor Newton Series 7 sable hair brush. And what you want to do when you go to pick a good brush, after you become sort of like you've dedicated yourself to watercoloring. It's time to get a good brush, and a sable hair brush holds its point. But what do you want to do in the art stores? You want to rub it on your finger, on the palm of your hand, to make sure it's soft enough that like there's no scratches. And good watercolor stores will have a place where you can test it on test water. So you want to like dip it in the water and make sure that it holds a fine point. So, and this is called a pointed round. This is your basic watercolor brush. And it comes in different sizes from a 0 to maybe a 20. I usually use, for field sketching, and this is a number 6. And one of the oldest brushes made in the world that's still being made are these French Isabelle brushes. They're really good. You can see they hold their squirrel hair. They hold a lot of water. They're great for laying down large areas of watercolor. They're nice and soft. One of the things that I don't really like about it doesn't really snap back and doesn't really hold a point, but it's really great for doing large, broad areas of washes. And this is called a flat. I don't usually use these in the field, but they have really good effects. You can kind of lay down large areas of water. You can use it on its side to move back and forth. You can kind of get italic kind of sizes with it. A lot of watercolorists use this. The happy painter, as you remember, he'll make trees with this. So that's your basic variety of watercolor brushes. But for field sketching, I think it's really important to get a travel brush. What's nice about this is it closes up. So when you're traveling with it, it won't harm the surface. I usually use 2 when I'm field sketching. This is a Da Vinci field sketch brush. This is a number 6. It holds a really nice little point. This is a much larger one. This is a number 10, and I use this primarily. A number 10 will hold its point. I can lay down large, broad areas of wash, and I can also get fine lines. So that's a basic introduction into watercolor. Now, there's 2 different types of watercolors. The first one is tubes. And tubes I usually use in the studio, and like I'll mix them in a mixing bowl, and you can kind of like mix your colors in the studio. I kind of use a combination of both. But for field sketching, you want a really nice portable watercolor box. This one I got in Florence, Italy. I really, really love it because it has a lot of features that are really hard to find. It has a really nice variety of colors, but one of the nice things, it has a ring on the back that I can hold my finger in it. And the other nice thing too is it carries its water. I can carry water in here, and also you can put scotch in here and drink it if the watercoloring session's not going well. But what's nice about this is you can fill it up full of water, and you put your water in here, and you can put it right in your hand, and you can watercolor directly in the field, and it's really, really handy. You can mix your colors here, and this is a really nice type to make. They make them in plastic, and they make some more kind of inexpensive kits. If you don't have a fancy one like this, I recommend for field sketching to make sure you have like a little watercolor bottle that you can take with you, and use your get your supply of water, and also some type of little device to mix your colors in when you're out in the field. So that's kind of the basic elements. And so what I'm going to do now is kind of show you how I set up. Generally what I set up is I have a paper towel to blot my watercolor. I set up with a jar of water, and then I also use my test strip. Where I will, this is really handy because I'll go back and forth. I'll load my brush up with water, I'll put some color in it, and I'll say, oh, that's too much. I can add more water, blot it, and I can work back and forth, and I can kind of see how my colors are working. Then the next thing I do is I set up, I'm going to be using my watercolor kit that I use in my studio. As you can see, it's pretty messy, but it's handy since we're going to be painting here in the studio. So that's kind of how I set up. I think the paper towel and the test strip is really, really important. Now, looking at some of the basic types of watercolor, to introduce you to watercolor, what I'm going to kind of begin to show you some basic types that are really, really important to know. This is the graded wash, where you're going from dark to light. This is the granulated wash, where you load up the brush with lots of lots of water, and the kind of pigment will kind of separate out and give this a really, really nice sort of watercolor kind of airbrush effect. And then this is a wet into wet technique that I use a lot, where you're just kind of mixing the colors in. So I'm going to try to demonstrate those different types, and this is a good thing to be practicing in the field. So the first thing you want to do is load your brush up with a lot of water. Make sure, remember, this is watercolor, and a lot of students are afraid to use water. So let me set up over here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So you can see lots of water in the brush. I'll blot it, I'll test it, and then I'm going to load the brush up with a lot of color. So the whole trick to this is to make sure I have a lot of color in the brush. And I'm using kind of a nice reddish. So the key here is kind of like you're swabbing the deck. I'm putting the brush down, and I'm moving it back and forward, like I'm kind of making, sort of like swabbing the deck as I move back and forth and pull that brush. You can see how I'm going from dark to light. That's really, really important. And one of the keys is see how I'm going over the previous color, kind of like I'm swabbing back and forth. And what I do is I take this all the way out to the end until I kind of run out of color. And the key with getting these nice, smooth, graded washes is you don't want to go back into it. You know, if you do, you'll really kind of ruin it. And then the other thing is the granulated wash. Typically, the darker pigmented colors, when you load the brush up with lots and lots of water, I'm floating the color. See how that's floating? And I'm moving it around, and you can begin to see the pigment kind of dropping out as I push this around. And it'll take a few moments for that to become granulated wash like the one I showed you, but you can begin to see it become granulated. And then the next one to practice is my favorite, which is the wet into wet, where I'll get the brush really, really wet, and I'll start to lay down a variety of colors, and they'll kind of mix together on their own. Let me get some nice yellow here. There, I'll put some yellow in there, and then a little bit of orange. And maybe some purple. And we'll put some blue in here. And then the other thing that happens, when I drop color, I can drop colors in here, and you can get some really kind of psychedelic, some really interesting psychedelic effects in a really fascinating kind of like array of colors. Dropping different colors in. And then what's neat about this is kind of watercolor will begin to take on its own kind of elements. There's another thing too, it's through the use of osmosis. If I can pull that color, I can pull it here, I can add some water to that and kind of begin to pull the color out, and kind of the color will follow the water. And you can it's really, really fun to play with. Now the other thing that I think is really important is something I call the push and pull, where I will, when I'm doing small types of vegetation and trees, so I'll load my brush up with color. And for example, here I'll put the color on this side of the tree. I'll wet my brush and I'll blot it. This is the key, blot your brush, and then I'll pull that color over. And you can see the color slowly, you can kind of get that graded wash as you move through it. The next one I'll use a little bit more blue in my color. And then I'll dry the brush and pull the color over like that. And then the next one I want to be like a little more viridian. And I'll put that in there. Clean the brush and pull it over. And then the ground plane, you can do the same thing. Push and pull, put the color down, wet the brush, clean it, make sure the brush is dry. You're almost using a dry brush, and you can get that wonderful sort of color. And then for this evergreen tree, I'm going to draw it because I'm using a lot of pigment, so I'm kind of drawing it. I'm kind of following the shape of the tree, and then I'll pull that over and down, and then I have that. So those are the basic things. The other neat thing about wet into wet is you can kind of move it. If it's wet, you can kind of move the paper around and get some really neat effects. You can begin to see the granulations happening, and then you can see the movement from dark to light there. Now, the other thing that I think is important in practicing watercolor, practicing these kind of graded washes, is that you can see the nice thing about watercolor is that the colors are so vibrant. And remember, like you have to work from light to dark. The trick with watercolor is you can't add color later. You can't add white. You have to kind of let the white come through. So one of the things to do is practicing these graded washes where you lay one wash down, let it dry, and then lay another color over the top of it to see how they mix together. And this can be a really, really good technique to practice your washes and watercolor. So those are some really good techniques to begin to practice before you, just to learn how to watercolor. So today's lesson, we're going to be watercoloring in the little river that runs through Davis. And what I'm going to show you, I'm going to start with is the very first thing that you have to start with is drawing. You can't really make a good watercolor out of a bad drawing. So what I'm going to do here is I've kind of laid this out. The first thing I like to do when I'm drawing in the field is create my XY axis. Like this, kind of orient myself into the drawing. So like I'm choosing to draw the area like looking across the lake, because I think it's kind of a natural composition. I'm using the rule of thirds. So on the left, I'm using the tree to kind of like frame the drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by locating myself in the drawing. I'm going to draw the edge of the water. So I put that in, and then the next thing I'm going to do is go for the furthest distance and kind of draw where the trees hit the sky. Like that kind of like orients the background. And I'm also using the different line weights. These in the background would be very, very, very light. So that sets my foreground and background. Then the next thing I'm going to do is there's a large shrub on the right-hand side of the drawing. So I'll go ahead and I'd put that in. And I'm also working light to dark. And then the next thing, the midground, is I'm going to kind of draw the edge of the water on the other side. So once I have that, I have my foreground, middle ground, and background, and then I'm going to kind of draw in this tree that's my foreground frame, which is something that's really, really important. Somehow that really kind of begins to frame the drawing. So I draw that in, and then I'll come in and I'll put in the trunk and the branching structure and how that comes in. And then there's also a little bit of a shrub behind this that I'll put in. And then the next thing is I'm going to draw the midground background. I'm going to put in these kind of curving lines that are the basis in the background. And now I can begin to draw the trees that are in the background. And one of the things you're doing, you're squinting, you're kind of looking at what is the character of the tree. What I always think is important is draw the silhouette of the tree first. That's what gives the trees its character. So is it kind of spiky? Is it kind of dense? So putting that in, and then there's a little bit of underground vegetation underneath these trees, and then kind of like the branching structure becomes really, really important. So that's my basis of setting up my drawing. So I've kind of I've got my composition, and now I'm ready to start watercoloring. So this is a little bit smaller of a drawing, and but I'm ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the background to the foreground, the very, very first thing that I put in is the sky, and that's where I'm going to work wet into wet. So I'm going to really load my brush up with color. I'm going to load it up with a lot of blue. I'm going to test it and then add a lot of water to that. And the thing with sky is you want to make sure your skies are much lighter than you think. So now I'm going to use the push and pull, and to get skies kind of becoming alive, I'm pulling that first kind of lay down of color down, and I'm going to try to make sure that I leave white space for the clouds as I pull that down, because when you're done, you'll be surprised at how much bluer that is. You don't want to have a really, really dark blue sky. So within that, I can kind of come back in, work wet into wet, lay some nice colors into that, and maybe add a little bit of purple for drama. So put a little bit of purple, like maybe in Davis, maybe it's starting to get cold up there. So that's done. So the next thing I'm going to do while I have my blue color out is I'm going to really go wet into wet for the water. So load the brush up with color. See, like nice. See, I'm pulling it. You know, one of the things that drives me crazy with teaching people how to watercolor is they're afraid of it. You know, like you're kind of swimming in the color. So you're going to fill that whole kind of body of water with lots of blue. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in and I'm going to drop blue into it to kind of get that kind of feeling of color. And then here's another trick you can use. If I feel like I've got too much color in there, I can blot my brush, and this is called lifting off. I can actually kind of lift off some color. See how I'm taking the color? If I want to lighten that up, if I want to get a little reflection, you know, like right where the shrub is, and in the foreground, if I want to kind of get some reflection there, this is called lifting up. You can't really do that once the paint has dried, but you can do it at the very beginning. So you can see I have a really good setup now. So now the next thing I'm going to do is the foreground, and since I'm drawing really, really quickly, I'm going to try to leave a line because I don't want the color to backslide into the previous color. So for the foreground, I'm going to use sort of like a brilliant sort of yellow. And then I'm going to use the push and pull because I want to leave white space, and I want to make sure that I don't touch the blue that I've already put down. So I'll pull that all across the page. And then I also, now that I've seen the sky, I'm going to want to add a little more blue in the sky. I want to bring this down here. You know, to get some, I can kind of begin to see where the clouds are forming, so that allows me to kind of get a nice kind of density of sky. So the next thing I'm going to do is again lay down the banks in the background, and that's sort of like, because, you know, I guess our summers are our winters and our winters are our summers, I'm going to use a lot of kind of like golden, California golden color. So I'm going to lay that primary color down along that ridge, and then I'm going to pull that color down. And I've got that. And this is, again, working wet into wet. I'm going to add a little bit of green to this on top of it, and again, this will only work as long as it's wet. So I've got my greens there. So that's done. So now I'm going to draw the individual trees, and each one of these trees that I picked. The reason I like this particular site is each one of these trees is a little bit different. Like the first tree on the right that I'm gonna draw, I'm gonna mix some blue with my green to kind of get kind of a dark bluish green. So I'm going to, again, working wet into wet, or like doing the push and pull. Also, the other thing to realize, I'm working with the sun on my left because I'm left-handed. So I'm going to go from dark to light on the left. I'm going to bring it over because that's the area where the sun is hitting. So I'm going to pull, see how I'm pulling that, leave white space in there. And then now that I have this color that I like, I might go around in different parts of the drawing and add that color in as a basis. Because I kind of like what it is. So you're kind of like working around. You're kind of working the whole page at this particular moment. The next tree is a little sort of like reddish, so I'm going to kind of make it a little kind of like oak brown. So I'm pulling that around, pushing it in. Now I clean the brush, pull the colors over. And I also like this color, so I added, you know, like underneath the understory here and here. And the next tree, let's see, what color should I make that? Maybe kind of orangish, since it is beginning to be the fall, because I really want a nice variety, the background. So I'll pull that color down like that. And the next tree is, again, I'm going to make this a little more bluish. There, it's a nice color. See how now I'm kind of pushing it around. See how I'm using the edge of the brush to kind of swab it around. And again, I'll clean my brush, move that around, pull it there. And I like that color, so I'll come in here and I can begin, because it's a little darker, I can begin to come back in the other vegetation and kind of make this from light, dark, you know, like the dark shadow areas, to make it go from dark to light, because that's one of the things, the key things, it gives kind of volume to your drawing. So you can see those 3 trees are basically done, which is what I love about watercolor. And the next thing is my favorite, the oak tree in the background. So I'm using kind of a brownish green to give that oak tree its illumination. I'll put that around, clean the brush, pull it over, make sure I leave white space. And to kind of show like how the tree comes through. So you can see this is really setting up pretty nicely. And then the next thing I'm going to do is darken these other areas of vegetation, like here, this kind of foreground. Now I've gone to a smaller brush, because I'm going to kind of come back in here and add different colors in the background. And then I'll go back to my bigger brush. And now I'm going to do the vegetation in the right foreground. And this should be kind of like really dark, you know, like, and as I progress in the drawing, I use more and more pigment and less water, because this kind of stage of the drawing, see how I'm pushing the brush around? As I move through it. So now I have that piece of vegetation. And the very last thing I'm going to do is the tree in the right foreground. And I want this to be as dark as possible. Leaving color inside, leaving the lights to come through as I move it around. And then where the light hits the tree on the left-hand side, I'm going to leave that as it is. Now the other thing I want to do is add some yellow to the background to kind of give these kind of curving areas a really nice sort of feel to them. So that's done, and then I'm going to put a little kind of add some nice bright yellow here in the foreground to kind of liven that up a little bit. Now it's detail time. Now I'm almost done. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my sepia tone to draw the branching structure of the tree on the left. So I really want a lot of color. As I pull that up, and boom, I have the tree. So the background vegetation, I want to indicate the trunks for that. So I'll come back in here, and drawing with it, I think it's really important to kind of show the branching structure of the trees. See how I flick it up to kind of get the branching structure? I think that's something that really gives the drawing a really nice kinetic effect. And I also like this kind of color that I'm going to kind of move around in different areas of the drawing to kind of give it sort of an aliveness. Now the tree, the shrub underneath the tree here in the foreground, I want to darken that up a little bit. to make it look like that tree is coming in. And now I'm using my Payne's gray to kind of go back and darken the edge of the tree. This is the point where it really becomes fun, where you can really begin to give volume to the tree. See how I'm going from light to dark? And that simple little thing really gives the tree a volume, because you're kind of like showing the undercutting of the branching structure. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the background. Especially where the one tree is in front of another, by giving that a little bit of darkness. Okay, now the fun. Now I'm almost done. Now I can really sort of have some fun and draw the final details. So what I'm going to do at this stage is begin to add the shadows. And those shadows are something that I think is really important, that kind of really gives the drawing a dimension to it. So I'm going to use some purple to create the shadow, to kind of show how these trees in the background are kind of accentuating the curvature of the ground plane. So using that kind of purple, and remember, drawing that the same thing, you want to go from dark to light. Where it's right next to the base of the tree, you want that to be dark, because shadows also, you know, like have a liveliness to them, sort of a light to dark. And then the other thing I'll do is use a little bit Payne's gray and come in here and kind of give some dimension to the shadow side of the bark, drawing the bark of that tree. And then I'm going to add, with a little bit of Payne's gray, I kind of want to show the shrubs, I mean, not the shrubs, but the kind of prickliness of the grass. And kind of see how I'm just drawing the grass with this. I'll come in and draw the basis of that. So I'm giving some texture and also kind of indicating the edge of the water there. And then the last thing, I'm going to put to kind of anchor the drawing in the foreground, I'm going to give this a nice dark shadow as the tree comes down and kind of like anchors the drawing on the left. And then I'll add a little bit of shadow there. And I'll come in with this Payne's gray and put a little bit at the base of all those trees. And like especially where the trunk goes underneath the tree there, I'll give that a little bit of dark Payne's gray to kind of help that out, and also add some sort of like flying leaves around the tree to kind of give it a sort of a dimension. And with that, I think I'm pretty well done. So there you have it, a kind of 20-minute field sketch that you'll be following along later as we replay this for you to watch. So thank you all, and I'll see you in a
So in conclusion, wasn't that fun? I just love to watercolor. I think this is one of the coolest things you'll ever be able to do. And just when this class is over, you should always keep your watercolor kit with you and be ready to watercolor at a moment's notice. So in summary, I'd like to leave you with something I'm really proud of. And this is my most recent book, Cartooning the Landscape, full of lots of helpful hints of what we learned to do today. Also, if you happen to buy it and I happen to see you on campus, you get a free powerful ship button in addition to that, and a beautiful autograph. If you want to look at more of my work, just look up the original Chip Sullivan, the original landscape cartoonist. My website, and also my other website is Gonzo Gardens. So please, send me your questions, and I'll see you in a bit in the field. Ciao, Rama.
Okay, well, how did everybody think that was? Was that fun or what? Yeah, I got some nods. I got great, some thumbs up. So I want to share a couple of resources with you because I feel like for most of you, I would think that it's like now, hopefully you feel like inspired to start, like taking this on. He's very playful and makes it really fun. So I wanted to share a couple of resources with you in case you wanted. I created an album. I'm going to put it in the chat on our Flickr site with some beauty shots of the Arboretum, with the idea that, like sometimes you actually like having like a photograph to go from. Now you can, like you can obviously do whatever you want, like go right out into your backyard or to a local park. But if you wanted to use these, I just wanted to make those available for you. And then I also wanted to invite you to share your work. So I'm going to put this in the chat now. Because we have our students share their work on Instagram using the hashtag UC Davis NatureRx, all one word. And if you happen, so if you could do that, that would be fabulous. We would love to see whatever you do. And if you do end up using a landscape in the Arboretum, we would love to know that too. So you can tag us at UC Davis _Arboretum. And that'll be fun for us too, because what we want to do is get a little collection of you all engaging with the landscape. So I hope that this has been fun. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap, or comments on how this was, or whether or not you would recommend this? Oh, that's so nice. Gabby says he made it less scary. Thanks for this mental break. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah, I feel like he's really good at doing that. Oh, good. I'm so glad. You're welcome. Any other comments? Good. Oh, very cool. People had their 5-year-old did it with them. Fun to see it start to finish. I know, good. And it's nice to get some of those insider tips too, right? On some of the materials, some of the techniques, stuff like that. Oh, good. I'm so glad that you all enjoyed it. Well, feel free to get in touch and let us know if there's anything else that we could do. Oh, it was a little fast, but very therapeutic. Okay, well, that's good to know because, like it's something that you could come back to too. Like if we're able to post that, it might be nice to actually go try it yourself and then watch the video again, because I'm sure you'll get more from it on repeating it. So, well, I think I will stay around if anybody wants any questions, but I'm going to let you all go, and thank you all for joining us. Please be sure to check out our upcoming, we have some more very exciting opportunities with partnership with the Botanical Conservatory about houseplants. We've got nature photography with our professional photographers at UC Davis, and they are amazing. There's also going to be a Japanese flower arranging session, which you won't want to miss. It is so fun. So I invite you to check those things out as well. And thank you for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and weekend. Take care.